Benvinguts, benvingut.
Welcome back. Let me remind you that this session is going to be in English. If you don't speak English, it's the right time to grab a simultaneous translation device.
We're here with Mr. Ben Aaronovitch. For those of you who don't know him, he's a British writer and screenwriter. He's known both for his work on television, for Jupiter Moon, Casualty, and Doctor Who. But also, and especially in Spain, for his successful urban fantasy series, The Rivers of London, which is currently being published in Spain by Autor Editorial. You have the latest one here. It's a blend of police procedural and with thriller elements, but with fantastical storytelling, so to say, mostly with magical, and it's, I want to start talking about London because it's the Rivers of London and it's supposed to be in London and you're a proud Londoner, but then when you read the series, it does start in London, but then they go to the country, they go to Aberdeen, even the Tony Winter's part of the stories are in Germany. So, is it really that London?
Yes. It's hard to explain. It's got a London attitude. It doesn't matter where Peter goes. He's got a London attitude. I mean, admittedly, Tobias Winter doesn't have a London attitude because he's from Mannheim. But we can't help where we come from. So. But but also I like to take my hero out of his comfort zone. So sometimes it's fun to take someone who is very familiar with a certain environment, very comfortable in that environment, and you stick them somewhere they know bugger all, and that works for me. So hence the countryside, or Scotland, or even the countryside in Scotland.
You say you like to take him out of his comfort zone. He's never been in a comfort zone, poor Peter. I mean, I was going to say an ordinary guy, not that ordinary, but suddenly he's in the middle of the folly of this supernatural police section. He's with Nightingale. He's finding all of a hidden magical London. I don't think you can say he's ever in a comfort zone.
Well, Peter, I mean, if he has a superpower, it's his flexibility. And the fact that he's very phlegmatic. I don't know, do you have weebles in the little round things that fall over and the little toys? Yeah. I always think of him as the weeble, like you knock him over and he just bounces right back up again. And that's how I imagine Peter. Peter, you put him in any situation, and after the initial shock, he will just bounce right back into it and adapt to that situation. He's a very adaptable boy. And so therefore, that's part of his charm for me. That's part of the thing that makes him a fun character, is that whatever the situation is, he will start to adapt to it very quickly. And so you tell him, he meets a ghost, and he goes, oh, ghosts. And then he doesn't spend, because I hate that particular trope, he doesn't spend the half a book going around, going, there's no such thing as ghosts, I must be going mad. He goes, right, that's a ghost. Ghosts exist, therefore we must deal with that. He's an empiricist. And so therefore he goes, we must deal with the fact that there are now ghosts. And if there's ghosts, then there's magic, and then there's magic, follows on. He doesn't have a problem with dealing with the world as it is. He's used to dealing with the world as it is. And all that happens when he meets magic is he goes, oh, well, now it includes magic, great. But also he learns magic, and so therefore now he can do magic. So watch out.
You once defined these books as, what if Gandalf was in the Sweeney?
Yeah.
And I'm going to accept the folly as a real part of the police department. But don't you think that calling Peter Gandalf is a bit of an overstatement?
Well, because it was that or Merlin, or Ged, and no one knew who Ged was. So, see, look out there. How many people know who Ged is? Go on, hands up. See? Because I couldn't say Ged joined the Sweeney. No one would know what I was bloody talking about. So,
perhaps one of the series' strengths is it's multiculturality. I mean, it creates a real, believable London. Peter, of course, his father is white, but his mother is from Sierra Leone. But also we've got like Dr. Abdul Walid or Detective Sergeant Stephanopoulos. I mean, it's really multicultural. And
I love the idea that Greek Cypriot is multicultural in London. I mean, she's like second generation, third generation Greek Cypriot. Like, you know, she's Cockney. Seriously.
Yeah, but I mean, when I say it's multicultural, it's because she has this familiar background, but at the same time, it's not like in many American movies where, no, I'm Italian. No, dude, your grandpa was Italian. You're from the Bronx. I mean, your characters are from a complex London.
Yes, but that's the London I was writing in. I was just writing the London I grew up in. See, I'm a lot of people. The thing is, a lot of people write about London. They're not from London, and the attitude generally is when people are from outside London, when they come to write for London, London's essentially a kind of television screen, a film screen, upon which they project their fantasies or their fears. So it's either this terrible city full of terribleness, or it's this bright city full of hope. But it's always their imagining of London. And what I set out to do is to write London as it is actually London. And that is, it's an enormously complex city with a complex history and complex people. It's the city I grew up in. And so therefore, I just sat down. It never even occurred to me that people would say, oh, this is like this. I chose Stephanopoulos because it was a funny name. And I really wish I hadn't, because every time I have to type it, I have to remember how to spell it. So I'm constantly sitting there going, bloody Stephanopoulos, why did I call us? You know, because you say, said Stephanopoulos, blah, 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 said Stephanopoulos. You're thinking, why the fuck did I call her Stephanopoulos? It's just, you know. So that's kind of like that. That's just the way it is. I mean, I didn't consciously decide to make it multicultural. It just is multicultural. In the same way that my local chip shop when I was growing up was Chinese. I had a Chinese chip shop. They do 30p chips with barbecue sauce on it. It was fantastic. I probably lived on that for about 10 years, you know. And I didn't think to myself, yeah. So I wasn't thinking, let's make this a multicultural world. I was just doing London as it appears to me growing up. So that
it's true what you say that. It's not many authors do a project and put, I would say, a tourist London guide, London. You say, sorry, I'm not explaining myself properly. I mean, in many books and in many shows, the London you see is just the Tower Bridge and London Bridge and the Parliament and stuff. And even though these places do appear in your books because they are in London in the end, but you don't just put these locations. And poor neighborhoods do appear as well. And I won't say underground.
Sorry, Hampstead is a poor neighborhood. It's funny.
No, I don't mean crappy. But I mean, it's not the posh side of London. And also you put like clubs and with jazz music and other places. And I think this works in the same way of this multiculturality I was talking about. Like it creates a more believable London, which helps the reader believe the supernatural stuff. I don't know if you agree with me.
No, I mean, one of the things is that I try and make the mundane aspects of the books as realistic as possible, including the policing. Because the more realistic you make the policing with all the bureaucracy and all the other things, the difficulties and boring paperwork and things like that, and the more you make London really London, it's easier to sell the audience the magic. Because then suddenly a unicorn comes trotting down Oxford Street. You just go, oh, unicorn on Oxford Street. Okay, totally agree. You know, also those shoes are on sale.
The title...
That's an Oxford Street joke, by the way, in case you're wondering.
The title of the series, The Rivers of London, I think it may have been a bit of symbolic, as places and locations in your books are not really that fixed. I mean, plots don't happen in one place, but they are, for example, Peter is always going from one place to another, investigating, doing the police work, and you don't only change from one book to the other, but inside the same book you have different locations, and some locations become characters. I mean, for example, rivers become some kind of gods. Do you think that perhaps this turns the book a bit more difficult for American audiences? Because I know that this series in America didn't go very well at the beginning.
I didn't really write it for Americans, so
good for you.
I'm not that bothered. Or to put a famous actress who was in Doctor Who. Am I bothered? No. I would have liked the money. The money would have been nice, but the thing is that I wasn't aiming at that audience. I wasn't aiming for a transatlantic audience. I wasn't aiming for a Spanish audience either. That was a surprise. I aimed at, you write a book for yourself. Ultimately, if you're being honest, you write a book for yourself, right? And you hope that other people will buy it. I wrote the book set in my city about characters that I like doing stuff that I thought was funny and great and exciting and whatever the other emotions are. And if other people like it, that's fine. And they did, which was great. Thank you very much, world. And, you know, I'm big in Germany. God knows why, but I'm big in Germany. And the Czech Republic. Who knew? Why did the Germans like it so much? I do not know. I do not know. The Japanese hated it.
Tobias. The Germans is because of Tobias.
I think the Germans like crime. The Germans are very keen on fun crime. They like fun crime, and so therefore...
And they do have a bit of a tradition of crime with fantastic. Like,
yeah, and they like the irony.
Holbein.
There's that whole German, there's a very, very dry, ironic sense of humor in parts of Germany. It's not everywhere, but in parts of Germany, I think it's... But I don't know. You don't know why people like your books. Look, I had a very clear idea who was going to buy this book, okay? So did my publisher, so did my agent. It was going to be a science fiction book. It was going to go off the science fiction shelves. It was going to sell to people who bought books off the science. It was basically me. It was going to sell to me, right? Lots of little me's out there would buy my book. It wasn't going to be a huge bestseller. I was going to be a mid-list science fiction writer, and that was fine because I just needed the money really badly. Right? And that was good. I was settling on that. I wasn't going to give up my day job or anything. And 3 days after the book came out, I went round to a friend's house and I said, I'd given him a copy of the book, as you do, and I said, "Did you enjoy my book?" And he said, "I don't know. My mother has stolen it and she won't give it back." And I was like, "Your mother?" And your mother reads Jodie Picoult. Your mother doesn't read urban fantasy novels. It's like, yeah, but she won't. And that's when we realized that it was not selling to the people we thought it was selling to. And after that, we just went through life going, fuck knows what's going on, basically. No. So I don't worry about the Americans.
No.
I've got his mother. I don't need the Americans.
That didn't sound as you thought it would. When you mix police procedural or crime novels with the fantastic, you never really know how people are going to react.
No.
I'm thinking of John Connolly, and everywhere I go, in any bookshop I go, it's always in the police section, in crime section. It's never in horror. It's like, dude, the murderer is a demon, or is a haunted house, or whatever. Have you had this experience where you talk with a muggle, with a non-fantasy reader that says, well, it's not actually fantasy? Do you have this experience?
Well, you have to make a distinction between genre and marketing. Genre is messy, right? Because it's not been made up by someone in an office, right? Nobody in an office or an academic somewhere made up genre. Genre comes out of us. We decide what genre is. We decide what science fiction is. We decide what horror is. And we know what we're talking about when we say horror, and we know what we're talking about when we say murder mysteries, right? And then marketing is about trying to find a demographic that you can sell a book to. So that someone who does like that kind of book will find that book. So Amazon will send you the signal or the bookshop. You'll go to the science fiction section. And you always have to make that distinction. When you're writing a book, it's useful to know what the conventions of genre is. You can ignore the marketing because that's not your job. There's people out there who get paid lots of money to do marketing, and I think we should just let them get on with it. Or fire them, one of the two. If they can't do their jobs properly.
Well,
I'm very ruthless that way.
I wanted to talk precisely about the frontiers of the genre. Because
The frontier.
yeah, I mean, I like to call it like that because it seems to be a rigid line, and then somebody comes and writes a novel that...
But it's not. It's never been a rigid line.
No, it is.
It's never a rigid line. It's always fuzzy. Take science fantasy. Say Star Wars. Is that a fantasy? Is that a science fiction? It's got all the trappings of science fiction, but really, it's fantasy. And then you get something like Andor that goes, no, actually, we're going to do Star Wars as proper science fiction. So you do as proper science, or political thriller in that case, right? And like I said, the genres come from us. So if we decide that we want police procedurals with magic, we have police procedurals with magic and sod everybody else, basically. So I didn't go out. So I have this reputation now with my publisher for being this genius. You broke the mold on this, but there are lots of people. Dresden Files. There's lots of people writing murder mysteries. There's even a series called Black London, which is about British London police officers who involved in magical crime. Right, with wizards and everything, right? Came out in the 90s. Written by an American, so it's comparatively unrealistic. But apart from that, it's someone else did it before me. I just got lucky. Basically, people liked it. You got to remain perspective about your own work. You got to say, there's lots of people writing really good books who are still working in their day jobs. Because nobody really liked them that much. And I don't know why, any more than I know why, the Brazilians didn't like the book.
So let's talk about capitalism.
Capitalism.
Yeah. Because
we are in Barcelona. I suppose we have to.
I think there is a clear political message in your books. Because throughout the books, power and corruption can easily be the one and the same thing. And I mean, even though Nightingale tries to teach Peter that magic is not only power, but it's also community, it's history, it's responsibility, in the end, problems always come from greedy posh people, or almost always, and especially from real estate developers. And
that's a London thing. That is, just trust me.
Believe me, I live in Barcelona. It's not a London thing.
No, but that particular emphasis on estate agents, that's a London thing.
Is perhaps fantasy the best way you found to talk about our world's problems?
I don't work like that. I don't work on the basis of subtext first. I always do. My motto is take care of the text and the subtext will take care of itself. And also there's a certain element of that. Any book written by an English person is about class. It's just inevitable. It's like when you read these reviews where they say, really, this book is about class. It's written by an English guy. It's about bloody class, one way or another, And so, yeah, posh people, they're going to get it in the neck in my books because I don't like posh people. It's like saying, the bad guys are bad. How did that happen? Right? But also, power and corruption in powerless people doesn't bother you that much, does it? I mean, you can ignore them most of the time. It's corruption in powerful people that does the most damage. And so, therefore, if you want to do an interesting story, if you've got people who are flinging around fireballs. They're not going to go after shoplifters, right? They're, you know, although I'm sure Peter has once or twice had to go after a shoplifter. I mean, certainly when he was before magic, a lot of his work would have been arresting shoplifters because he ran that, you know, he did Oxford Street. So lots of, you know, missing shoes, another Oxford Street joke. Sorry, I couldn't resist that one. So I don't think to myself, oh, I'm going to give it to the man, right? I just write the stories and then the bad guys kind of present themselves. It's like you know, and the last 15 years of British politics has presented us with plenty of horrible people that you can use as models for bad guys. And so I just never look a gift horse in the mouth.
In Broken Homes, magic appears to be some kind of nexus, so to say, between corruption and the corrupt people and those who suffer it at the, not say at the bottom, but perhaps, yeah, at the bottom of society. And maybe contrary to all, we were talking before about police novels. And in classical police stories or detective stories like Hercule Poirot and this, we see the posh people and their crimes, and a detective trying to solve it. And then with Hard Boiled, we only see the underworld and the ugly, dirty side of society. And maybe you use magic to get to some sort of middle point where we do see the ugly, posh side, but also the underworld, like a whole world.
Well, you have the demi-monde in my world, but that's not the underworld. I'm very clear about that. The magic in the magic community, if you want to call it in my world, and only Peter would call it the magic community because everybody else just calls it the demi-monde. They are just a part of society. They're just a part of society that goes mostly unnoticed. But then most small groups in society go unnoticed. We don't notice them.
So I didn't mean the demigods and stuff. I mean,
you mean the underworld, like they're because it's boring. I'm not interested in them. I'm not interested in petty criminals and sad people whose lives have been destroyed by circumstances. I mean, it is sad. I feel for them, but I'm not interested in them. And they don't make very good bad guys. So
and yet, Peter's father is a junkie.
Was a junkie.
What was?
Was a junkie. And that's very suspicious that he suddenly stopped. I'm very suspicious of that. Yeah, but that was because I don't know, he just arrived, okay? I was thinking about the character, and the character just turned up with this junkie jazz playing. I mean, also he's a jazz man, right? So, like, the junkie was pretty much implied by that as well. So, he was a classical jazz man. He was, and that whole family dynamic. You got to explain why he's still living in an estate, right? Why his parents should have been more successful. So, you have to explain that, why he's still living on a council estate, why they haven't bought their council flat and moved out to Enfield or somewhere dreadful like that. And you just have to explain things. So you just make these decisions, and these decisions lead to consequences, and the consequences lead to stories. All stories are just your characters doing things, right? When people talk about, do you write plot or do you write character? The answer is those two things are the same thing, right? It's just sometimes your characters, you know, if your characters stand around and moan, people go, oh, you're writing characters, right? If your characters are active, they go, oh, you're writing plot. But actually, all you're doing is writing characters that are doing things. And I let them take me where they go. You can feel where a story is going. Now, my bad guys tend to be posh people because posh people tend to have the money, right? They tend to be actors who can do bad things, right? And the magic is just a fun way of blowing them up, usually, for me. But also the magic is, I don't think of it as a metaphor. It's not a metaphor for something. It's just something I have decided exists in the world. But it has metaphorical content. It has what Tolkien called applicability. People look at it and they say, this is applicable to my life. This is applicable to something I think about. But he's not necessarily doing an allegory. You're not necessarily doing an allegory. I mean, there are direct allegories that nobody ever notices, which is just the noise the fuck out of me, really, because For example, the whole situation in Broken Homes is based on a real situation that happened in Westminster Council, where they gerrymandered the Westminster Council under this horrific woman, and they stuck all these people in these tower blocks which had asbestos to get them out of the borough, so they wouldn't be able to vote in the borough anymore, and so therefore move these natural kind of Labour voters out of this, make it a Tory seat, right? That was their big ambition, and they put them in this asbestos-riddled estate. And I thought, well, what if it wasn't asbestos? What if it was magic? What if this estate? And then a lot of that just disappeared out of the story because it wasn't very interesting, and so but. Then I got really into the architects, and I found out about Bruno Taut, who is a real guy, right? And like the glass pavilion that he built in the 1920s. And I thought, what if these people had actually been wizards? What if they're like a lot of German, in what's called impressionist architects, had been actual wizards? And the Bauhaus movement had been part of Germany's magical awakening in the 20s. And you just go down that route, and it takes you to that route. Then you have to think, well, what's going on in this estate? Well, I want to blow. I mean, I knew I was going to blow it up, okay, right from the start. That's about the only thing I knew was going to happen, was that Peter was going to be standing on top of it when it blew up. So I had to have a reason for it blowing up. So I came up with a reason. Then I found out about mass dampers, which is the thing that dangles down to stop it from shaking to bits in a high wind. So that was the magic. Oh, there's magic in the magic damper, sing on the top, and you just build the story like that. And the text, the subtext, follows on from that. Then it becomes a story about architecture and the impact of architecture on social architecture, particularly on people's lives. But I didn't plan it like that. I didn't say, I am going to write a book about the impact of architecture on people's social lives. It just came out of that. It came out of Peter's interest in architecture. It came out of necessity for the story. And because I had this bad guy and I needed him to blow up the bloody building. So I needed a reason for him to blow up the building. And that's where it came from. All of that stuff just sort of falls, and you follow the shape of the story. All stories have a shape. And you can always tell if you ever watched or read a story where you get to the end and you think that's wrong, that's the wrong ending, right? But it's either too sad or it's too happy or something like that. It's like a happy ending, or you think, or it's this miserable ending, and you think, that's because stories have a shape and they tell you where they're going to go, and where you decide where the ending is. And when you get there, you have to accept that ending, or you have to rewrite the story right from the start again, which I never do because I'm very lazy.
I was going to ask you about the writing, because the idea of, no, you sit down, you write, and let the characters and the plot develop and go anywhere. It's very nice in theory, but in reality, any writer knows that when you reread what you just wrote down, you say, this may be crap. From your first writing to the published book, how long does it take, and how much work do you put in it?
Okay, there's a difference, right? Publishers like to have 18 months from when you hand it in to when they publish it, especially if you're successful, because they want to develop a whole campaign about it. Also, the bookshops, I don't know what the bookshops are in Spain, but Waterstones in Britain and Hugendubel in Germany, they want time. They want to be able to slot it into their schedule. And so therefore they like 18 months. So that's from when I hand in the book. So as far as I'm concerned, the book's bloody finished when I hand it in. Okay, everything else after that is just, oh God, do we have to, right? So that is anything from 6 months to 18 months it takes me to write a book. Totally variable. I never know which one it's going to be when I start the book. I keep saying to myself, this is bloody book 15. It should be getting easier, and it isn't. Okay, but at the same time, I don't rewrite, really, not very often. I'm one of those people that I don't commit words to paper unless it's the right words Does that make any sense? So I do cut, but I cut at kind of like half a sentence level. And it all adds up. I end up with a discard pile of about 20% of the words I wrote end up in the rubbish bin. But they don't end up, I don't have like whole chapters where I go, oh no, phoomp, into the bin. I'd kill myself if that happened. That's just dreadful. So I don't rewrite. So a lot of writers say, oh, it's not in the writing, it's in the rewriting. And I say, fuck off. Right? I've written the bloody book. I'm sick of the thing by the time it goes to the editor. I'm not bloody rewriting. I mean, the editor will come back and go, this character's name changes halfway through the book, and you have to fix that kind of stuff. And there's what's called in architecture, they're called snagging. When you're building something, it's called snagging. It's when you built the building and you have to go and make sure the wires aren't dangling out of the ceiling and all the cement is all in the right place and the plumbing works. That's called snagging in building. And I do snagging. I do not do rewriting. Rewriting is something that happens to other writers, as far as I'm concerned. Let them eat cake, I say.
All your books in Spain are novels, but you have also written some novellas in the River series.
Yeah.
How do you decide whether it's going to be just a novella, say 100 pages?
Well, people pay you. They say, could you write a novella? And I went, all right. That was the first novella. They said, could you write it? There's a company called Subterranean Press in America who do specialist, very lovely copies, lots of, it's hand-painted kind of, I don't know, bollocks they put on it. But it's like, they do it, and they said, do you want to write a novella? I'd never written a novella before. So I thought, oh, I'll give that a go. So I wrote a novella, and I thought, great, this is so short. You're just getting bored of it, and it's finished. So I thought, I'll do another one of those. So I pitched 4 books, because I thought, here is my opportunity to do stories about people who aren't Peter, non-Peter stories, right? And I thought, I want to do a Tobias Winter story, I want to do a Reynolds story, I want to do an Abigail story, and I want to do a Nightingale story. And I pitched it as spring, summer, autumn, winter, because I thought, in case they didn't want them as 4 novellas, they might take them as a big, fat novel, sort of linked set of stories, right? Because I'm greedy that way. And so I pitched it to them, and they said, here, have some money. So I went and wrote them, basically. That's how that happened. And stories have a length. You can tell when you have an idea, you can usually tell what length the story is. Is it a short story? Is it a novel? Is it a novella? A novella is very flexible. That's 30 to 50,000 words is a novella. Some people will go as short as 20,000, but according to the Hugo Committee, that's actually a noveletta or something, a novelette. Right? I think that's a long, short story myself, personally, but hey.
Yeah, we're not going to argue with them.
No, well, I don't, like I don't rewrite, I don't argue with people about things like that.
You said one of the novellas is about Nightingale.
Yes.
But not that long ago, I read an interview by you in which you said that you didn't want to put too much Nightingale or to give him the point of view because he's like your secret sauce.
Yes.
And you can only put a certain amount of secret
Sprinkle
sauce.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spanish
So that's
we call it
basically the whole book
salpimentar.
is him being sprinkled.
So, but now you have a novella.
No, because it's not from his point of view. I made up. It's basically P.G. Wodehouse with magic in the 1920s New York, into which Nightingale slotted in so perfectly. It's the quickest I've ever written anything. It just wrote itself. I was just so pleased with that book. It's one of my favorites because it was just fun to write. I just thought, it's P.G. Wodehouse. It was Jeeves and Wooster with Nightingale.
Well, actually, you're talking about the point of view. Throughout most of the stories, the point of view is that of Peter's.
Yeah.
But occasionally you have abandoned it. I mean, for instance, in Stone on Sky, which is not published in Spain yet, but hopefully, you get also Abigail's point of view.
Yes.
How and when do you decide what point of view you're going to use?
Well, what happened was I realised that Nightingale and Abigail were going up to Scotland with Peter. And I realised that the story had basically 2 elements. It had an element that was going on in Aberdeen proper, and it had an element that was going on in the countryside, in Aberdeenshire, which is north of Aberdeen. And I could either write it so that people reported this to Peter, so you hear Peter and people come in and say such and such a thing happened, or I could put another POV character to do that part of the story, and the obvious choice for that was Abigail, and so that Abigail, that's what Abigail, it's all very instrumentalist. It's not, you know, it's all in the service of the story. The story went there, therefore I needed another POV character. The same thing is happening in the book I'm currently writing now. I needed another POV character. It's not Abigail this time, because I'm never doing that again, because she speaks in the first person present tense and Peter speaks in the first person past tense, and I just got so freaking confused about which one I was writing, and my copy editor was just like, I ended up with loads of notes going, no, it's he said, not he says. He said, you know, wrong character, right? And so this one's different. So.
I wanted to ask also about the narrator, because reading Stone Sky, it quite shocked me, because I've got used to a certain tenses and a certain narrator, and suddenly it was Abigail narrating, a first person. Did you choose at the beginning, did you choose the narrator, or it just came to you?
Came to me while I was writing. I was about 3 chapters in, and I went, I've got to go out, I've got to incorporate this. And I thought, right, it's going to have to be Abigail. It was just logically, it had to be Abigail. And there was just no other character it would really suit. And then that allowed me to go into, you know, what is Abigail doing? And then she I'm not going to give a spoiler away, has an affair, and that kind of like came into it. I wasn't expecting that. That kind of came as a bit of a shock. And then she just went off on her own and started. My characters bully me, right? So I'm writing a book, and my characters come along, and I say, I want you to go over here, and they go, no. And I go, what do you mean, no? You're a character. Get over there. And they go, fuck off, I'm not doing that. That's just stupid. I wouldn't do that. And you go, oh, you have to rewrite things because they won't do things. And they, you know, I go, get back in the plot, you bastard. And they go, no. So, you know, it's like, it's just... this is why it takes me a long time to write a book, really, to be honest. It's all the arguing with the characters.
Normally, we would have only like 5-10 minutes for questions from the public, but I know that you love questions from the audience.
Yeah, I've got to get some amusement out of it somehow.
So if you have any questions, raise your hand. Aixequeu molt els braços, perquè si no amb els focus no m'enteraré.
You will have to raise it very high, otherwise I will not see it.
To ask you something. Nightingale is complicated.
Yes.
And he appears rather little, actually. He doesn't appear that much, but his importance is capital. And how do you keep the balance between having him being this secret source that we said, and not turning into a deus ex machina?
Well, it's like cooking. You just taste it, and if there's too much salt, you stop putting salt in. It's really that simple. You just go, oh, it's too much Nightingale. No, bit less Nightingale, bit more, I don't know, something else. I don't like Deus Ex Machinas, except for the time that I literally had a Deus Ex Machina, which is my favourite thing, which is when in Foxglove Summer, when Beverly literally turns up as in a machine to save Peter. I just couldn't resist that, right? But no, Nightingale's very useful, but he's overpowered, and so therefore I have to find things for Nightingale to do that's away from Peter, so that Peter has to deal with a certain set of situations. And so all you have to do is just make sure that he's busy. And which is not really that complicated, because you have to assume that lots of stuff is going on all the time, and so therefore sometimes Nightingale's not available. He's, you know. But I don't think about it, to be honest. It's not. I don't make these plans. You see, you've got this very structural idea about writing, right? I don't make plans when I'm writing. I'm given up making plans. I used to make plans. Now I don't make plans, right? I've given up because it's just no point, and it just causes pain and suffering. I've got friends who write 2,000 to 3,000 word outlines before they start a book. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a waste of 2,000 to 3,000 words, right? Because that's a chapter, right? And you haven't written anything. It's just a chapter of what's going to happen in the book. You know, just go on with the bloody book. But that works for them. Everyone has to find what works for them when you're writing. You find what works for you. And I have found over trial and practice, over 40 years, right, what works for me, and I'm not doing anything else. Thank you very much. I'm set in my ways. No changes for me. Got a stick, see? It's Zimmer frame next.
Hi ha alguna pregunta? Per allà estic veient dos braços.
So there are a couple of questions.
Ben.
Thank you. A little bit of the magical world in Germany, and also that there exists some kind of magic in France. Will we see more of that? And is there a magical world here in Spain that we will get to know?
Okay. I don't need that. You've got to assume that just about every European country had its own magical tradition, because that makes sense. Because apart from anything else, Newton wrote in Latin. And Newton is the sort of what they call the Newtonian synthesis, if you're a clever clogs magician in my world. And so therefore it's spread all over Europe. So that's because it was spread across the entirety of the kind of intellectual fervor and beyond into the Near East as well. So there's got to be, but you've got to understand from my point of view, I've got to work out, okay, when did it start? Who set it up? Why did they set it up? Was there more than one tradition? Because you often get more than one tradition in a thing. Is there an official institution? Did it survive Franco, apart from anything else? Or did Franco set it up and did it not survive the fall of Franco? And these are things that I'm not qualified to bloody decide, to be totally honest, until I've done way more research, right, than I think I've got time for right now. But if I sat down, those are the things I would think about. And then I would probably find a couple of Spanish people and beat them up until they told me the answers, which is my approach to these things. I've got Germans. I do that to Germans. I go, ha! Tell me about your German. And they go, oh, I don't want to. It's like, you have to. It's important.
In a series as long as this, you have maybe to reread the first books you wrote in order to continue with the series, or do you have some kind of summary of every character? Because I'm curious about that.
Okay. What I should have done around book 3 was start keeping a list, but I didn't. So I got to about book 7, and I realized that I needed to make this list, but it was 7 books. Actually, it was 7 books and about 3 novellas at that point. So I hired someone to do it. Basically, a friend of mine called Andy, who I worked with, and she's a weird woman, but she's very good. And so she basically did what we call the big list, which turned out to be so big that it crashes my computer every time I try and load it. So now it's actually 3 big lists. So it's characters, magic, and locations. And it basically has that so that I can keep all the characters. Also, I listen to the books. Every so often I will sit down and listen to the books, which can be quite painful with some of the early books sometimes. And to remind myself so I don't repeat myself, because the tendency when you're writing a long series is you've got certain favourite terms of phrase, certain situations that you like, and the trouble is these days people read them all in one go, right? They read it one, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I do that with a lot of I get hold of a series and I literally read every single book one after another, and you sit there going, oh, he's repeating himself by book 8. Well, it serves you right for reading the book every one after another, right? Because it takes writers a year between books, so you forget what you've put in, so you have to watch that sort of thing. And I sit there, have I said this too many times? There's one particular book I was reading, everyone keeps giving one-arm shrugs, they keep lifting one arm. I mean all the characters, not just one character, but all the characters. So you've got to watch that sort of thing. I realised I'd had 8 characters called Zach. So obviously Zach was the name that I went for any minor character. Oh, it's called Zach. So now I've got it's actually got a whiteboard and it says nobody is called Zach. So yeah, so that's what I do. So I listen to them. It's very useful because you can do that while doing the washing up and stuff. And I have that list, and I check that list, and then my copy editor checks that list, and then basically I hope that nobody notices that I've repeated myself 8 or 9 times.
Aquí davant hi havia una altra pregunta.
Hi. I write urban fantasy based in Barcelona. I wanted to ask you, about architecture and art in London. This influence there are influence in your stories, and how much?
What influences?
Well, about architecture and art in London, in your story, there is.
What the influence of architecture in your...
Oh, architecture, right, sorry. I thought you said heart in London. Well, that came about because if you're writing a book set in the countryside and you don't know what anything's called, right? Your description of the countryside goes like this. There was some green stuff that went down to some blue stuff with some more green stuff, and then there was some brown stuff with some more green stuff on top. And it's the same if you're describing a city. If you don't know what the architectural styles are, you're just saying, like, it's a building, it's an old building, it's an old ugly building. You've got very bland kind of descriptions of it. You don't know what an architrave or a Doric column is. You can't describe it, you see. So and the thing is, I was writing in the first person. And the first person, if you're writing in the third person, you can just have the narrator sort of say, it was a Gothic architrave, but my character knew nothing about it. But in the first person, you can't do that. And so I gave him an interest in architecture. And then I got really interested in architecture. And so I'm very interested in vernacular architecture, which is the architecture of where people live, rather than like churches and stuff, which I don't find that interesting. I mean, I like looking at them, but I don't think to myself, oh, great, another church, great. But I really get it. I mean, I'm very interested in kind of like urbanism generally, so I sit there going, oh, look, a tram, so I'm excited about that sort of thing. Subway systems, integrated transport networks. It's a weird thing to be excited about, but that's what I get excited about. And architecture fits into that. And London, the thing about London is if you're a Londoner and you take a Londoner and you blindfold them and you put them in a van and you drive around in them and they don't kill you when they get out, and you turn around and you take the thing off, they will be able to tell you within about a mile how far away from the centre of London they are just by looking around them. But they won't be able to tell you why. And the difference is Peter can tell you why. He will say that is a 1910 terraced, that's 1910 semi-detached house in the kind of Edwardian style with a 1920s shopping arcade, right? And he'll be a Art Deco shopping arcade, and he will know what they're all called, so that when I come to describe them, I can use the actual words. But architecture is an influence. Like I said, I am interested now, and that almost came from writing the books, in urban planning, in how cities are designed and run. These are very, very urban fantasies. And so therefore, that's the sort of thing that interests me. I mean, for example, I know what a superblock is, you see. I'm here in Barcelona, land of the superblock, right? Do you know what a superblock is? Who knows what a superblock is? Oh, God, you're bloody living in Barcelona, you don't know what a sodding superblock is. Like where you get 4 blocks and you put a... Like,
Una superilla.
Is it not called a superblock?
Here we call it superilla.
Okay, yeah, right. So, this is a major thing. You should be more excited. See, like, over the world, nerds like me, right, urban planning nerds like me get really excited about superblocks. It turns us on something rotten. It's like...
No. Actually, it's not only architecture. In your novels, the arts are very important. Of course, architecture, but also jazz music, for example, not only because of Peter's father, but for many plots is important. And also the underground scene of artists. What we don't find is literature. There seem to be no writers around it. Why not literature?
We're boring as fuck. I mean, if you notice how there's no biographies, there's no bio pictures about writers, okay? Do you know why? Because it's a person sitting in front of a desk for hours. And that's all we do. During lockdown, I didn't even notice there was a lockdown for 3 weeks, right? I just thought it just went very quiet, right? That's writers. Like, you get occasional exciting writers like Hemingway, but I reckon he realized he was actually much more boring than he thought he was, and that's why he shot himself. That's my theory, anyway. He just went, oh shit, I'm really boring, and then shot himself. So they're not very interesting to write about. Writers aren't very interesting. It's like you go to a party and the bloody guitarist can romance people and the poets can say poetry. You go like, yo, I love you, come back in 6 months and I'll have a book about it. Didn't get me any women whatsoever at all. I despaired.
¿Alguna otra pregunta? Aquí daban una y Alfonso una altra.
Yeah. When I think about urban fantasy, I think like this is a very London-centered genre. Like it's like the place to be when it's like an urban fantasy. Even though you could talk about maybe doing in Spain, I think London is like the perfect place for urban fantasy. Why do you think it's about that? Maybe because it mixes folklore with contemporary setting, and it's like the kind of city that can do both, or what?
Well, it's got a lot of history. I mean, not that Barcelona and Madrid don't have a lot of history. I mean, as much history, in fact, more than London. But there's something about London. I think it's the fact that it was the centre of this empire, and that sort of then condensed around it. So you basically have London is there because of where its position is. It's basically where the Romans could put a bridge across the River Thames. So it became a four-way crossroads. And it's remained that four-way crossroads to this day. It's remained this major world city, this centre of trade, this centre of empire, this place where people go. And it's got a lot of history, and it's not very planned. You know, no one came along and went, let's put some boulevards. Like, you go out to here, Barcelona, I was looking there thinking, you get nice, clean lines of fire down there. That's what those boulevards are for. It's so that people won't build barricades. That's what Haussmann put them in Paris for. And so London doesn't have that. London, when the Great Fire of London happened and most of the centre part of London burnt down, the architects really wanted to come in and drive great big highways through it. But Londoners, within 2 days of the place burning down, Londoners had moved back and staked out where their houses were and refused to move. And the king didn't have enough money to buy them out, and so therefore London, central London is still like that. It's still that kind of weird shape because of that. And London has this persistence. It's a very persistent city. It's bits of it, are still there. It's bits of it just emerge out of the ground when you're not expecting it. There's all sorts of things, hidden things. And so I think it lends itself to the supernatural. It lends itself to ghost stories. It lends itself to histories. It lends itself to slice of life. And also it's somewhere everyone knows. Everyone thinks they know London. Everyone's, because of the cultural impact it had in the 19th century. And it's just a very well-known city. I mean, I don't know. I just grew up there, okay? I write about London rather than Manchester because I grew up in London rather than Manchester. If I'd grown up in Barcelona, I'd be writing urban fantasy set in Barcelona, and you wouldn't have to be asking me this question. You'd go, why is Barcelona so good for urban fantasy? Right? Because I would have written the story set in Barcelona, possibly. And so I'm really bad at answering that question, to be honest. I have no fucking idea, let's be honest, okay? It just is, and I take advantage of it. That's the answer.
Y la última pregunta.
You kind of alluded to this already, but when I read sort of the first 5 books, I read them in a complete frenzy, one after the other. And it takes a while for them to settle into a consistent sort of tone, I found at least. And, how did you find the process of converging onto some sort of consistent setting and tone and vibe? Were there things where you decided to throw them out, or was this more natural?
I love this idea that there's some kind of intent behind what I do, right? I wrote the first book at 4 o'clock in the morning because I was going bankrupt, right? Because I was doing a full-time job and I had a full-time teenager. And when you you have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to write it. So I was writing it in a desperate attempt to stave off bankruptcy. And so that's like, that first book is rough, right? It's full of stuff that I wouldn't have put in if I'd thought about it longer, but I was desperate to get it done. And it got it done. And then you get to the next book, and then you're, oh, Christ, now I have to write a second book. So then you write that one in a tearing hurry, and then you're on to the third book. And yeah, the tone becomes more consistent because I think, oh, I've figured out, I invent new things. Every book, I seem to invent new things that sort of explain other things. And you end up with this entire architecture that I then had to pay Andy, like I mentioned, to write down so that I remembered all of it. You've got lists of books, you've got characters from the past, you've got like just stuff that you made up in the tearing hurry. A lot of stuff gets made up on the fly. A good example is Dr. Waleed, right? Dr. Waleed, he actually only appears at the second pathology scene. And I got to the second pathology scene, I thought, shit, I need a pathologist. And I went, I don't know, Scottish, Muslim, go, right? That was Dr. Waleed, right? And as soon as he appeared, I went, oh, fuck, I'm stuck with him now. Right, because he had an interesting backstory. It was the same with Beverly Brooke. She was there to open the door to her mum's house. And then I got, the next thing I know, she's the love interest. I was like, for God's sake, make up your bloody mind what you're going to do. And you make these things up, and the good ideas you keep, and the bad ideas you pretend didn't exist. That's basically how it works. And you sift it out. So of course the books become more consistent. But then you run into the problem of your books becoming too samey. And you start to think to yourself, oh, my books are becoming a bit samey. I better do something to kind of like change them up a little bit. So you send them to Herefordshire, so that at least you're changing the scene, or you use a different narrator for part of it, or you decide, right, this book is going to be a book where we move away from those themes and we look at those themes. But then in the end, the themes just end up choosing themselves anyway. So I don't know why I bother thinking that, to be honest. I start every book with the expectations that this will be the different one. So that should tell you something. and then I hand it in, and they go, yes, it's just as good as the last one. You go, oh, okay. Because as a writer, you're never really satisfied with your work, right? You always think it could have been a bit better, but on the other hand, that would involve me rewriting, and I think we've established my attitude to rewriting.
I'm sorry, but we have no more time. Mr. Aaronovitch will be now over there signing his books. You have all of them at the bookstore, and please give it up for him. Thank you very much.